and whatever peace process that does come up in the future will not include Hamas and should not include Hamas. So I think the situation on the ground in Gaza has changed as well. But it's important to think about this from the Palestinians' perspective as well as the Israelis. They've been subject to 2 and a bit years of attacks. They're seeing their land inside the West Bank being eroded day by day. And they're looking to the international community for support for their requests for a two-state solution.
You make the suggestion that if not now, then when? Because clearly, with the amount of settlement activity that is going on in the West Bank, there's not much of a state left. Who is going to pick up the baton for the Palestinians? Have you had evidence within the committee as to who should lead the Palestinian effort?
We have concerns about the Palestinian Authority, that poor governance there, that the leadership that's been in place for a very long time. It is clear, I think, that there does need to be a refresh of leadership. They do need some new spokespeople, some new leaders in the West Bank as well as in Gaza. I don't think it's the UK's place to tell the Palestinians how to do that, but it's clear that will be needed if there is to be a two-state solution and a process towards it.
You're clearly very critical in this report, not just of the Labour government, but I think successive governments. You will be aware that your former leader, Jeremy Corbyn, who's just formed a new party, said these empty words of the Prime Minister won't stop the government being, quotes, complicit in genocide. He now has his own party. There is a risk that you're outflanked on the left of the party by the former leader.
I reject that characterisation by Jeremy Corbyn. The government has taken a number of steps. The arms embargo in September last year, the sanctions against extremist Israeli settlers and ministers, and the cancelling of our trade negotiations with Israel. So it's not fair to say the UK is complicit. Just because I think the UK should be going further, and I am asking the government to do that. I completely reject that characterisation.
It's a very interesting report. I'm sure people will want to read it. It is on the committee website. Alex Ballinger, thank you very much for coming on the programme.
Thank you.
We will take a look now at the situation inside Gaza, because the UN has reported that more than 1 million children are bearing the brunt of deepening starvation in the Strip. From today, Israel says it will allow Jordan and the United Arab Emirates to airdrop humanitarian supplies into Gaza. It has happened before, although it is a blunt method to deliver aid given the sheer desperation on the ground and the obvious risk of being shot while trying to recover it. We'll see whether the EU decides to join that effort. The Hamas-run health ministry says that this month alone, at least 48 people, including 20 children, have died of causes related to malnutrition. But right now, there is no sign of any breakthrough in the talks. Last night, the US envoy Steve Witkoff withdrew from the negotiations on a 60-day ceasefire. Hamas, he says, is not acting in good faith, and the US will now consider, he says, alternative options to bring the hostages home. In fact, in the last few minutes, Donald Trump, on leaving the White House, has said Hamas really didn't want to make a deal. But the breakthrough in negotiations sparked huge protests in Tel Aviv last night. The families of the hostages released their own statement voicing their concerns. This was, they said, another missed opportunity to bring back all the 50 hostages. Failure to agree a compromise would be yet another moral, security and diplomatic failure, they added, in an endless chain of failures. So what does all that mean then for those in Gaza trying to preserve life in what is an almost hopeless situation? Sam Sears is a paramedic who works at the Al Mawasi Field Hospital and Al Zaweda Healthcare. I asked him what he's seeing in his hospitals.
Yes, we are still seeing the usual traumatic injuries that are coming into our hospital with gunshot wounds, etc. But then compounded onto that is the malnutrition of patients, dehydration, the lack of food that we can get on the markets and that patients can get for themselves on the markets.
But you see evidence, do you, daily of malnutrition? Because you'll know that the Israelis say that the UN is overstating the situation.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, just to further what I said earlier, that we're seeing specifically pregnant females that are coming in that can't get enough nutrition themselves, and obviously their unborn child being at risk, at higher risk. This is getting considerably worse. And then when we have follow-up care for the children, the babies that are newborn are coming in looking completely malnourished at a really early age, which is a massive concern.
While we're talking to you, we're seeing some of those pictures and pictures of people at soup kitchens where the daily handout is a very thin lentil soup. How does that compound things for local staff who are working with you?
Yeah, we have a lot of national staff that are local to here. They are in the same situation. They're struggling to find food. They're only eating perhaps once or twice a day, and are in a very similar situation, which obviously is in a negative position.
You mentioned some of those who've been shot near the aid distribution sites that the Gaza Health Foundation is running, humanitarian foundation, I beg your pardon. The BBC has a report that 2 women were shot close to one of those points yesterday and another one today. How often do you get patients at your clinics who've been shot at aid distribution sites?
I mean, it's difficult to say the exact location where they've been injured. We obviously just receive them if we're the closest receiving hospital to them, to where the injuries happened. But we also receive referrals from the NASA hospital and other non-governmental organisation charities that have set up field hospitals close to us. If they become overwhelmed, then we can support, and vice versa if we have a multiple casualty incident.
We talked to the head of UNOCHA yesterday, who look after the logistics in the Gaza Strip, and the difficulty they were speaking of relating to fuel. There's clearly a chronic shortage of fuel now. What does that mean for running a hospital, running clinics, for you and your team? How long can you last?
Yeah, it's one of the biggest issues we're facing at the moment. We're having to turn off generators between the hours of kind of 5 and 8, apart from in our theatres, in our operating departments, just so we could try and maintain the hospital for as long as we can. Yeah, we're predicting around 28 days at the moment until we run out of fuel completely. And I know neighbouring facilities are reporting the same timeframes. So the issue of getting fuel in, as well as aid and medications, is huge.
That's the medic Sam Sears, who is working in a clinic in Al Mawasi. We'll take a short break around the world and across the UK. You're watching BBC News. Welcome back. We're keeping our eye on Air Force One, which is currently on standby at Air Force Base Andrews, awaiting the arrival of the President. He has just left the White House, actually, and there's a couple of lines from the pool spray that he did en route, which I can bring you. He's been largely talking about trade, so obviously his run-in with Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, has got most of the interest in Washington today. He said when leaving the White House that he got the impression yesterday from Jerome Powell that the Fed chair might be ready to lower rates. And on the trade negotiation that's currently ongoing with the EU. He says there's a 50-50 chance of a deal being done by the deadline on August 1st, which will be music to the ears of the likes of Volkswagen, who announced today that the tariffs imposed by Donald Trump had cost it 1.3 billion euros in the first half of this year. But he also said that he's looking forward to his visit to Scotland, which is where he's headed, and to meeting the Scottish leader, John Swinney. He'll be hoping to leave behind all the controversy over Jeffrey Epstein when he steps onto the plane. He's going to open a golf course in Aberdeen, named after his late Scottish mother, Mary. Our Scotland correspondent Lorna Gordon is there and has been giving us more details on the President's programme.
He's expected here at Turnberry a little later on, and then later in his trip heading up to Aberdeenshire to his second golf course to open that new course there. It's been billed as a private visit. As suggested, he's probably hoping for a bit of a break from those pressures back home, but I'm not sure they'll ease even if he's thousands of miles away. He's likely to get questions on those issues even across here in Scotland. And even though he's taken some time out inevitably to play some golf, he is also holding some political meetings as well. As you said, expected to meet the British Prime Minister. Their talks expected to touch on trade issues. He'll also meet Scotland's First Minister. Remember, John Swinney about a year ago publicly backed Kamala Harris in her US presidential bid, but you know, that's all in the past. Now they'll be talking about issues of concern to Scotland, again trade. John Swinney has said he will raise his concerns about what is going on in Gaza with the US president as well. We are anticipating some protests here in Scotland, but I have to say that the level of security I've seen, at least around Turnberry, is unlike anything I've seen before for any previous visit of Donald Trump to Scotland, and he has been here several times, both prior to getting into politics and of course while he was president as well. But this time around, the road in front of Turnberry is completely shut off. There is a 10-foot high fence surrounding the golf course, very restricted access in this area. It said about 5,000 officers will be on duty for the duration of his trip. There's a mutual aid process that kicks in where officers in other parts of the United Kingdom come in to support those who are based here in Scotland. It's an operation costing many millions of pounds. We are told that peaceful protest will be facilitated, but of course that can't stray into the area of criminal damage. That's the warning that the police are giving to any potential protesters. But yes, a big security operation already in place ahead of the President touching down in Scotland a little later on today.
Lorna Gordon reporting. Resident doctors in England, previously known as junior doctors, have walked out this morning at the beginning of a 5-day strike over pay and conditions. In short, they want salaries restored to the value of where they stood in 2008. The Health Secretary says there's no more money to fund that increase. Our health correspondent Dominic Hughes reports.
What do we want? Fair pay! When do we want it? Yesterday!
From 7 o'clock this morning, resident doctors in England were once again taking to picket lines. This is the 12th time they've gone on strike in just over 2 years, demanding restoration of pay they say has been cut by below-inflation pay deals.
No doctor wants to be on strike. I want to be able to help my patients.
But for doctors like Mohammed, training to be an A&E specialist, this is a fight not just about pay, but about the future of the NHS.
The public, myself, yourself, we will all collectively suffer when we can't see a doctor. When I started working as a doctor 8 years ago, it was, 4-hour waits in A&E was unacceptable. Now you'd be lucky to see a doctor. I'm lucky to see my patient within 8 hours in an emergency department. That's absolutely unacceptable.
Writing in the Times newspaper this morning, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, criticised the BMA for rushing into a strike, and he urged resident doctors not to follow their union down what he described as the damaging road of industrial action, arguing this would cause a huge loss for the NHS and the country.
Good morning, how are you doing?
Good morning,
And at NHS England's London headquarters this morning, the Health Secretary Wes Streeting said the strike is putting patients at risk.
However much the BMA try and sugarcoat it,
What they are fundamentally doing today is forgetting the 3 words that should be at the forefront of every doctor's minds every day, which is do no harm. What the public cannot understand, what other NHS staff cannot understand, is how, after having had a 28.9% pay rise and a government willing to go further on improving the working conditions of doctors, they are still trying to lead their members out on strike.
And these are worrying times for patients like Gloria. She contacted Your Voice, Your BBC News because she needs treatment for eye cancer and is waiting for a shoulder operation.
All I want to do is sit and cry because no one wants to help me.
The resident doctors' strike means appointments for both have been cancelled, and she's furious.
Mentally, it's affecting me really badly because I don't know whether I'm coming or going with the doctors. No one will listen. To me, they feel as if they're playing God to everybody. And how would they feel if it was their parents?
The big challenge for hospital bosses is to try and minimise the impact of this industrial action, particularly on things like planned operations or outpatient clinics. So that's been the main focus of their work over the last couple of days. Senior managers at NHS England are determined that this time fewer people will experience the cancellations that Gloria has faced.
Cancellations leads to a very detrimental impact on patients physically and psychologically. And in June last year, with the strikes then, almost 60,000 patients' appointments were cancelled or rescheduled. So we are very keen, having learned from that experience, to minimise the cancellations as far as possible.
Over the next 5 days, those who need care are being encouraged to use the NHS in England as normal, but there will inevitably be disruption to some services. And at this point, no sign there won't be more walkouts by resident doctors in the months to come. Dominic Hughes, BBC News.
Opening bell coming up in New York. We've got all the business news for us. Do stay with BBC News.
Now on BBC News, the latest from New York and around the world. Business Today.
Live from New York at the opening bell, this is Business Today. US markets holding near record highs as investors weigh the impact of Trump's Fed visit. Showdown at America's central bank. Trump hammers the Federal Reserve chair over the cost of construction work, but says he won't fire him. And teeing up for another face-off across the pond. Keir Starmer plans to take his shot and press Donald Trump over lowering steel tariffs as the president heads to his Scottish golf course. Also, the making of Queen Bee as Beyoncé's latest tour draws to a close. We hear from the man who helped to create the phenomenon, her former manager and father, Matthew Knowles. Welcome to Business Today, live from New York. I'm Michelle Fleury. Now, Wall Street is bucking the trend while stocks are falling overseas. US markets have opened mixed this morning with the Dow and the S&P 500 both up. Investors are taking a deep breath ahead of a key deadline. There's just 1 week to go for countries to hammer out a deal to lower tariffs, with big implications for global trade. The US still has yet to reach a deal with two of its closest trading partners, Canada and Mexico. Also in investors' minds, growing tension between President Trump and Fed Chair Jerome Powell. The two clashed on camera during a public tour of the Federal Reserve's $2.5 billion renovation project in Washington. Let's take another look at that moment.
It looks like it's about 3.1 billion. It went up a little bit, or a lot. So the 2.7 is now 3.1.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah, it just came out.
Yeah, and I haven't heard that from anybody at the Fed.
Yeah, it just came out.
Our notes had it about 3.1 as well.
3.1,
3.2. This came from us?
Yes. I don't know who does that.
You're including the Martin renovation. You just added
our entire capital plan.
Yeah, you just added in a third building is what that is. That's a third building.
Well, no, but it's a building that's being built.
No, it was built 5 years ago.
So an awkward moment there, but then later on President Trump said that the conversation went very well and that he had no plans to fire the Fed chief, just that he wanted interest rates to come down. Well, for more on all of this, we can go to Matt Orton. He is Chief Market Strategist at Raymond James Investment Management. Great to see you this morning. Always good to see you on the programme. Look, what is your take on that awkward exchange on Jay Powell's home turf?
Hi, good morning, Michelle. And it's an awkward moment. It's always awkward whenever Trump continues to pressure Powell. But I think the market is taking solace in the fact that Trump is not taking any action or indicating that he's going to do anything to remove Powell from his seat. So I think the market's looking through all of that uncertainty. And what the market instead is focusing on is earnings. And I think the optimism we see baked into the market right now is really based on the fact that corporate earnings continue to come in strong and better than expected. And we're getting positive guidance from companies again, despite the tariff uncertainty that's out there. So I think the read through when you look at the micro level of what's happening in the economy is still very, very constructive.
I mean, one stock, though, that is not doing so well is Intel. Its shares currently down around 9%. It said it was cutting its workforce by 15% and exiting certain business lines like the foundry business. I mean, speak to me about the significance of that.
So, Michelle, Intel's an interesting company because it used to be the pride and joy of the semiconductor industry in the U.S., but it really got left behind with innovation. And once again, its earnings results have disappointed. The company isn't able to grow. And I think the stock trading down today is emblematic of the fact that investors, broadly speaking, are looking for growth in the industry and really leaning into artificial intelligence and being on the cutting edge of those chips. And that's just not where Intel is. And they've instead been focused on cost cutting rather than figuring out how to grow. And so I think, again, it speaks to the fact that investors, especially in the technology sector and in semiconductors that are vital to the build out of artificial intelligence, we need to see growth and the ability to translate that growth into positive earnings for the companies overall. And that's why you've seen so many other companies in the semi space do so well over the past 2 years, is because not only are they growing rapidly, they have tremendously high margins and are able to continue to reinvest in their business.
Matt Orton, Chief Market Strategist at Raymond James Investment Management. Good to see you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
The US President is currently getting ready to fly across the pond on his way to Scotland, where he will be hitting a few golf balls before getting down to serious business and meeting UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer early next week. And top of the agenda will be steel tariffs. Both countries rubber-stamped a tariff deal earlier this month, with UK steel exported to the US subject to a 25% tariff, lower than Trump's 50% global rate. And you can see there live pictures from the Andrews Air Force Base of Donald Trump's helicopter, where we're expecting the president to come out, as I said, preparing for his journey to Scotland next week. Now, Keir Starmer, as I mentioned, the UK Prime Minister, is under pressure from the steel industry to try to get an exemption from tariffs altogether. That is going to be a key topic of discussion when the British Prime Minister meets with Donald Trump, who, as I said, is expected to come out of that helicopter at any moment, travelling on his way to Scotland. And so that is going to be something there. You can see him walking down the stairs on his way to Scotland, getting ready to take off to Scotland. And again, this trip is going to be significant because Britain, 1 week ahead of the trade deadline, is one of the few countries to have kind of already secured a tariff deal or outline, if you like. But steel is one of the big outstanding issues. That is something that the Prime Minister is hoping to raise when he meets with Donald Trump, who is headed to the Turnberry golf course in Scotland, one of his properties there, for a few rounds first before he has those meetings next week. And you can see him there on the tarmac saluting. And it looks like there, you can see, will he stop and say anything? Nope, he's boarding Air Force One, going straight on his way. Well, we can join Callum. Oh, we're going to stay with this for a few more seconds. But as I mentioned, tariffs, again, is very much in focus. Britain has a trade deal with the United States. The EU is still waiting to see if it can get something done before August 1st. But Canada and Mexico, still no word there on whether or not any trade deal will be reached. Well, as I said, we are going to talk now about those steel tariffs and the exemption, whether or not one can be sort of pulled together when these two leaders meet next week. And for more on this, we can speak to Callum McPherson, who is the head of commodities at Investec. Good to see you this morning, Callum. What impact are the tariffs already having on UK steel companies?
Well, a lot of the steel production in the UK that is being exported to the US is actually higher value finished, semi-finished goods, alloys and things like that, which are not quite so easily replaced as some of the other more commoditized products on international markets. On top of that, there's the perception that the UK will ultimately get a reasonably favorable arrangement on tariffs. So I think at the moment it's a case of bearing with it while that's being sorted out.
We were talking there about Keir Starmer wanting to try and sort of raise the issue of steel tariffs. What do you think would be a reasonable outcome for the UK steel industry?
Well, when that pact was agreed last month, there was talk about moving ultimately towards a 0% tariff on steel, whereas it's currently on 25%, which, as you say, is better than many other countries have. So I guess that would presumably be Sir Keir Starmer's ideal outcome, would be to get to 0% tariffs on steel. At the other end of the spectrum, he would definitely hope, I imagine it doesn't get any worse than 25%. Maybe it'll ultimately settle somewhere in between the two, and we'll just have to wait and see.
Watch this space. Callum McPherson, Head of Commodities at Investec, thanks for joining us. Now, one of the biggest music stars of our time, Beyoncé, will be on stage in Las Vegas this weekend for the final shows of her latest tour. The tour's stop in Los Angeles grossed $55.7 million, making it the biggest reported single venue engagement by a woman in Billboard history. My colleague Tag Enright spoke to Beyoncé's father, Mr. Matthew Knowles. As well as having once been his daughter's manager, he previously worked in corporate marketing and brand development. Tag asked him about the recipe for Beyoncé's success and how he feels about this chapter in her career drawing to a close.
As a father, I'm just extremely proud of Beyoncé, what she's accomplished, how she's having impact around the world, and the economy when you look at those numbers.
Did you imagine all of this? Did you imagine Beyoncé's ultimate success back at a time when you were helping to promote Destiny's Child, then helping her to go solo? Did you feel that she could achieve this much?
Well, success is not about feeling. Success is about strategy, work ethics, passion, and those are all the things that Beyoncé brings to the table as an artist and as an amazing entertainer. Did we believe? Absolutely, because we put in the work.
Well, speaking of strategy, worth stressing, you didn't spend your whole career or haven't spent your whole career in music. Previously, you've worked for big name companies like Xerox, Johnson & Johnson. I wonder whether that kind of more conventional business experience has shaped you as a promoter of musical artistry, helped you to do things perhaps a little bit differently?
Well, absolutely. When I came into the industry, I came from corporate America. It was about branding and understanding marketing. When I got into the music industry, they were about selling records, not about building a brand as much. And that was our approach along with the fundamentals of music business.
So what is it about Beyoncé's brand that has helped her to become so successful, would you say?
Well, I think it's about perception and building brand identity and brand development, and also having great songs. It's a plethora of things that goes into her success. And she started at a young age. We often forget that this is her 25th year in the music industry.
Decision next Wednesday. Rates are expected to stay on hold. Separately, we've got the monthly jobs report on Friday. And of course, earnings will be in the spotlight again. Some of the big names in tech, Apple, Microsoft.
My dad was a farmer, but he also had a radio talk show for farmers who called in with their farming problems. He'd patiently listen to every conflicting account of what was and wasn't working. That was really influential to how I approached my journalism. Building trust by taking the time to understand a situation clearly before reporting a story. In a 24-hour news cycle, Patience can be so frustrating, but it's a crucial tool. I'm Lucy Hawkins on BBC News Now.
Hello there, I'm Ben Croucher with your latest from the BBC Sports Centre. Cricket first, where England are looking to bat themselves into a strong position over India on day 3 of the 4th Test in Manchester, resuming on 225 for 2. England have now moved on to 394 for 4 in reply to India's first innings of 358. Joe Root and Ollie Pope added 144 for the 3rd wicket, before Pope was caught at slip for 71. Root is still there, unbeaten on 98 drinks in the afternoon session, closing in on the 120 he needs to move second on the list of leading run scorers in Test cricket. You can listen to this one right now over on the BBC Sport website and app. Newcastle's players say Alexander Isak stayed behind for specialist treatment amid speculation that he's missing their tour of Asia to explore a possible move away from the club. The team arrived in Singapore on Friday without their star striker, who's been linked with a move to the Premier League champions Liverpool.
For what we know, Isak's injury, he's not been training for, 5 days. So he stayed there to take himself better with better equipment. So he's there, a small injury. Of course, he's a top player. We know everything is going around him, but yeah, I don't know. What we know is Isak is staying there to do some physical treatment.
The Burnley goalkeeper James Trafford was heavily linked with the move to Newcastle, but looks set for a return to Manchester City. Trafford left the Etihad Stadium 2 years ago, but impressed last season as Burnley won promotion back to the Premier League. City have exercised a buyback clause in his contract, matching a £27 million offer from Newcastle for the 22-year-old. He's expected to sign a 5-year deal. The British and Irish Lions have called upon a familiar figure to help galvanise their squad ahead of the 2nd Test against Australia. Martin Johnson, a former Lions skipper and World Cup winner with England, joined the team at a dinner on Thursday ahead of their meeting at the Melbourne Cricket Ground on Saturday.
He talked about the mentality for this group and for him as a player. That wasn't an issue. It was compounding errors. These are the things you need to make sure that you're on top of during the match. And it was, again, what a privilege to have him come in and he handed some jerseys out, and it was a cool moment, in a tour of loads of cool moments.
Well, Australia head into the match knowing defeat would end their hopes of winning a series against the Lions for only the 3rd time in their history. Captain Harry Wilson wants the Wallabies to show their true colours at the MCG.
I feel as if we probably didn't play our sort of footy we wanted to play. We didn't fire as many shots as we would have liked, so we just saw a few areas which we can improve on, and we want to go out there, we want to pose ourselves physically, we want to back our skills, and we just want to go out there and start fast, throw your body around, knowing there's some quality bench players that come in and finish. I'd say there's pressure on both teams. They want to wrap up the series and we want to keep the series alive.
And finally, we finish with Major League Baseball, I say baseball, because the star of the show as the Detroit Tigers hosted the Toronto Blue Jays was a squirrel. Fans at Comerica Park were treated to a remarkable display of speed, agility and athleticism from the little critter. Just look at that jump. If you thought that was nuts, it's not actually the first time one's invaded a Tigers game this season. One made it onto the field in a game in May. Detroit beat San Francisco that day, but alas, the Blue Jays won this one 11-4. And sprint qualifying for the Belgian Grand Prix this weekend due to get underway very shortly. Oscar Piastri was quickest in practice. You can follow live text coverage of that over on the BBC Sport website and app. There's more here on BBC News throughout the day.
Ben, thank you very much indeed. I'll show you a grainy piece of footage of Donald Trump's plane currently heading into the distance. He's just set off from Joint Base Andrews on his way to Scotland. You might just be able to pick it out there in the distance. But before he left, he did speak briefly to reporters. Let's play you some of that.
Good morning, how are you? Can we ask you about the lawsuits of the DOJ?
Those young people, they just said too much winning. Too much winning, sir, they know it. And it is a lot of winning. We had the best 6 months ever. We're now heading to Scotland. I'm meeting with the Prime Minister of UK. Some of you are going, I guess, and a lot of you aren't. Are you going? Huh? Well, you got to get moving. That's a good one. That's going to be a good one. So we have great numbers we just announced. I don't have to go over it because you've seen them, but we have great economic numbers. The deal with Japan is amazing. You give us $550 billion, and we have totally open access into Japan. Those numbers are great. I mean, the kids actually just said, very, very cute, actually. I walked up, they said, sir, there's too much winning. They picked up on a little routine, you know. Go ahead.
Mr. President, can I ask you about the DOJ lawsuit that you filed yesterday against New York City and Mayor Adams? In the lawsuit, they named the CBP officer that was Officer Louis Scott. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's DOJ going against New York, but we're going against a lot of other places, too. We want to bring safety to our cities, but that's a pretty, that's going to be a pretty routine filing with other cities too. As you know, we've started numerous lawsuits with other cities. We want to bring safety. We've got to get the criminals out, and we're doing it in record numbers.
Are you hoping Todd Blanche gets up on Gaza in negotiations?
Yeah, Gaza, they pulled out of Gaza. They pulled out in terms of negotiating. It was too bad. Hamas didn't really want to make a deal. I think they want to die, and it's very, very bad. And it got to be to a point where you're going to have to finish the job. They really, they asked for things. Don't forget, we got a lot of hostages out. So now we're down to the final hostages, and they know what happens after you get the final hostages. And basically, because of that, they really didn't want to make a deal. I saw that. So they pulled out, and they're going to have to fight, and they're going to have to clean it up. You're going to have to get rid of it.
What are you hoping Todd Blanche gets out of his meetings with Ghislaine Maxwell?
Well, I don't know about the meeting. I know it's taking place, and he's a fantastic man. He's a great attorney, and people should really focus on how well the country's doing, or they should focus on the fact that Barack Hussein Obama led a coup, or they should focus on the fact that Larry Summers from Harvard, that Bill Clinton, who you know very well, and lots of other friends, really close friends of Jeffrey Summers, should be spoken about. Because, you know, Jeffrey Epstein should be spoken about. And they should speak about them, because they don't talk about them, they talk about me. I have nothing to do with the guy.
Are you considering Maxwell? Are you considering before you do any business deals with the UK?
Yeah, I'm going to meet with the Prime Minister right now. We're going to be over there in about 6 hours. We're meeting with the Prime Minister tonight. We're going to be talking about the trade deal that we made and maybe even improve it.
Are you considering clemency for Ghislaine Maxwell? Are you considering clemency for Ghislaine Maxwell, sir?
I saw homeless people sleeping right outside the gates of the White House. Are you concerned about that?
I think it's terrible, and we'll have them removed immediately. We do remove it. We've got to get the mayor to run this city properly. This city has to be run. You know, I have the right to take it over, and I think it's terrible. Where are they? Where did you see them?
Right outside on Pennsylvania Avenue.
Near the Treasury.
Right across the Mafia Park near the Treasury. Have you heard about Todd Blanche's interview with Ghislaine Maxwell?
Are you still disappointed in President
Biden or clemency for Ghislaine?
Well, I don't want to talk about that. What I do want to say is that Todd is a great attorney, but you ought to be speaking about Larry Summers. You ought to be speaking about some of his friends that are hedge fund guys. They're all over the place. You ought to be speaking about Bill Clinton, who went to the island 28 times. I never went to the island.
Do you maintain you did not write a letter for Jeffrey Epstein's birthday?
I don't even know what they're talking about. Now, somebody could have written a letter and used my name, but that's happened a lot. All you have to do is take a look at the dossier, the fake dossier. Everything's fake with that administration. Everything's fake with the Democrats. Take a look at what they just found about the dossier. Everything is fake. They're a bunch of sick people. Where did you see the people laying outside?
Right across the street from Lafayette Park, sir, towards 15.
We'll take care of it.
Are you hoping to meet with President Putin for bringing hostages home? What are the alternative methods to bring hostages home?
Well, we got a lot of them out, and it's I've always said those last 10 or 20 are going to be the toughest. because Hamas knows what happens when they don't have any bargaining chip. And they really broke a deal. They broke a deal, and you're going to have to do what you have to do right now. It's a terrible thing. And I always knew that. I said, when you get down to the last one, they're not going to be able to make a deal.
Would you consider a pardon or a commutation for Ghislaine Maxwell if
It's something I haven't thought about. It's really something. It's something I'm allowed to do it, but it's something I have not thought about.
But you wouldn't rule it out.
Donald Trump en route to Scotland. Let me give you the brief headlines on that. Jeffrey Epstein, I had nothing to do with him, says Donald Trump. I never sent a letter. It's all fake news. He said that Hamas does not want a deal. They just want to die. He'll certainly be pushed on that when he comes here to the UK. And in his conversations with the UK Prime Minister, he says we will talk trade. Maybe we can improve the deal. That will be music to the ears of Sir Keir Starmer. He'll land here this evening for a visit to 2 of his golf courses. Plenty in that for Matthew to pick over in Verified Live, which is coming up. Don't go away.
I will give away the vast majority of my money. It's my full-time focus for the rest of my life.
Und wenn Menschen bei uns in Europa angekommen sind, dann finde ich, haben sie ein Recht darauf, menschlich behandelt zu werden.
He really truly loved this regime and Vladimir Putin. That's why Vladimir Putin hated him so much.
Every time I lost, I just did a deep dive into the reason why we lost.
There are times when I have noticed something more emotional in one take than the other, which I think comes from being a woman.
When the big names talk, they talk to us.
Live from London, this is BBC News. The hunger crisis deepens in Gaza. The United Nations warns the entire humanitarian system is collapsing and starvation is rising.
My kids keep crying around me. I don't sleep at night because they keep crying. I make them drink salt water to get to sleep. If we are to die from hunger, so be it. Because seeking aid is seeking death.
President Macron confirms that France will recognise a Palestinian state. Israel and the US says it rewards Hamas. In the past few minutes, President Trump has blamed Hamas for the breakdown of ceasefire talks in Qatar.
It was too bad. Hamas didn't really want to make a deal. I think they want to die.
We'll have the very latest. We'll also talk live this hour to the World Food Programme. Our other main headlines. Resident doctors in England go on strike for 5 days over pay. The Health Secretary warns patients will suffer. And as the build-up to the final of the Euros on Sunday continues, England will have a news conference this hour. Hello, welcome to today's Verified Live, and we start with the catastrophic situation in Gaza. The UN says the entire humanitarian system is collapsing. The charity MSF says 1 in 4 young children and pregnant women are now malnourished. The pictures, the accounts on the ground are harrowing. We'll talk to the World Food Programme here in a moment or two, but diplomatically, there's also been a major development today with Emmanuel Macron saying France will recognise Palestinian statehood in September, the first major Western nation to actually do that. The United States says the French decision is reckless. Israel claims it rewards terror. One other important development in the last few minutes, Donald Trump has just said that Hamas doesn't want a deal and wants to die, as he updated journalists on the latest ceasefire talks. So let's start this hour with this report from Joe Inwood.
Most of Yazan's life has been war. The 2-year-old lives in the Al-Shati refugee camp in the north of the Gaza Strip. His parents say all they can afford are a few vegetables boiled in water.
I don't care if the war continues, but let the borders open, let the aid in for the children. If we leave this boy, maybe soon he will slip through our fingers. Maybe he will die and we didn't manage to do anything for him.
At a nearby hospital, they see more evidence of what the World Health Organization has called man-made mass starvation, caused by the blockade on Gaza. Doctors here say they see children too weak to cry or move.
It is very catastrophic in Gaza, from bad to worse. Unfortunately, we had 5 deaths at the hospital because of malnutrition. By comparison to other months, in May we had no deaths. In June we had 2 deaths. We are not done with July and we've already had 5 deaths. Of those 5, we had 1 case that died because of a lack of medicine.
Some small amount of aid is getting through, but it's far from enough. The daily search for food gets more desperate. Israel has previously accused Hamas of looting supplies and blames the UN for failing to distribute the aid that does get through, something aid agencies and the UN squarely reject. It is in the context of an ever-worsening humanitarian crisis that France has said it will formally recognise a Palestinian state. President Macron wrote on social media that we must build the state of Palestine, ensure its viability, and ensure that by accepting its demilitarisation and fully recognising Israel, it contributes to the security of all the Middle East. There is no alternative. France's decision increases pressure on the UK government to follow suit. And it's not just protesters outside Parliament who think that now is the moment to recognise the state of Palestine. Many Labour MPs want to see it happen, as does the influential Foreign Affairs Select Committee. The government says it will act, but when it will have the most impact. Any decision to recognise a Palestinian state would put the UK not just at odds with Israel, who call it a reward for terror, but also the United States, the one country able to force Israel's hand. All the while, the suffering in Gaza continues, with an end to the fighting looking as elusive as ever. Joe Inwood, BBC News.
Well, in the last few minutes, President Trump has been talking to journalists. He took off on Air Force One for a trip to Scotland. When he was leaving the White House, the president answered questions from journalists on a number of topics, including Gaza. Have a listen.
Giving up on Gaza in negotiations?
Yeah, Gaza, they pulled out of Gaza. They pulled out in terms of negotiating. It was too bad. Hamas didn't really want to make a deal. I think they want to die, and it's very, very bad. And it got to be to a point where you're going to have to finish the job. They really, they asked for things. Don't forget, we got a lot of hostages out. So now we're down to the final hostages, and they know what happens after you get the final hostages. And basically, because of that, they really didn't want to make a deal. I saw that. So they pulled out, and they're going to have to fight, and they're going to have to clean it up. You're going to have to get rid of it.
Well, we'll play you more of that interview a little later, but I'm joined now by our correspondents from Jerusalem, Emir Nada, and also our political correspondent, Nick Eardley, who's at Westminster. Let's speak to Emir first of all. And Emir, tell me the latest, first of all, on the humanitarian situation.
Well, as you said, it's a catastrophic situation. In addition to the images we're seeing more and more coming out of Gaza of children in the most distressing of states, obviously acutely malnourished, distended bellies, bones bare. We're also seeing the facts being reported from some of the international aid agencies on the ground, like Doctors Without Borders, who today said that a quarter of the children that they're seeing and pregnant mothers and breastfeeding mothers are acutely malnourished. And they also talk about something we've been seeing widely in Gaza, which is that staff members, perhaps people who work for international aid organisations who could be considered amongst the salaried of Gaza, they're struggling to eat more than once every day or two. And with the Doctors Without Borders statement didn't mince its words. It accuses Israel of using starvation deliberately as a weapon of war. Israel has been rejecting these claims. It's been saying that it's Hamas who's obstructing the delivery of aid. It says that international organisations are not picking up the aid that's there. And those international organisations, we've been speaking to them over the past week. They've been telling us that they are trying to get that aid. When they do manage to get the permissions from the Israeli military to deliver it, it frequently comes under Israeli gunfire. And just today we've had a new statement from the Israeli government saying that they are looking now to allow aid drops into Gaza. So planes flying over, dropping parachuted crates of aid. We've seen this before in the war, and it's been chaotic and it's been deadly, crushing people, landing into the sea where people, we've seen reports of people drowning, and it's seen by many in the humanitarian community as a sign of failure when the borders to Gaza are right there, and it is indeed easy to distribute aid. They just need to have the aid get in as much of a free and open way as possible.
I'll be back to you in a second, but let's go to Westminster and to Nick. And Nick, two questions, which is, there was that phone call that Keir Starmer is going to have with Emmanuel Macron and the German Chancellor. Any word coming out of that and the growing frustration from the British government? And how much pressure now on Keir Starmer to follow Emmanuel Macron in terms of statehood and recognition?
I don't think that call's actually happened yet, Matthew, but there is clearly growing frustration in the UK. The statement the Prime Minister put out last night was pretty strongly worded. But the question is whether that is going to be enough. And I think there is increasing pressure on the UK to do what France did and say that it's going to formally recognise a state of Palestine. Some of that pressure comes simply because such a close ally in France made that decision itself. Some of it comes from opposition parties, some of it comes from Labour MPs and cabinet ministers who have been bringing this up with the Prime Minister, urging him to be more proactive. But I don't think that it's going to be imminent for the UK. Two reasons. Firstly, Keir Starmer's been walking a bit of a diplomatic tightrope. He's trying to keep Europe happy, but he's trying to also stay as close as he can to President Trump. And we know that President Trump's administration has been critical of the French for saying that they were going to recognise a Palestinian state. Given that Keir Starmer will be meeting President Trump, we think, in the next few days in Scotland, I think it's unlikely that he'd want to do this now. Second reason, though, is a practical one. We've heard from cabinet ministers in the UK that they're just not sure that this would make that much of a difference. They want there to be a ceasefire, then more talks about the future before they would recognise a Palestinian state, thinking that it's more likely to happen in that situation than simply saying at the UN that that's what they want to happen. Remember, of course, the France decision is a big one diplomatically, but in practical terms, it doesn't actually change anything. So yes, absolutely more pressure on the UK government, and as we see more of the horrifying images that have been coming out of Gaza in the last few days, I think that pressure will continue, but no sign yet that Keir Starmer is prepared to make that leap.
Nick, thank you. Let's go back to Jerusalem. Emir, Benjamin Netanyahu said about an hour or so ago that we are now considering alternative options with the US to bring our hostages home. What do you think he means by that?
It's not clear what he might mean. We've seen throughout the course of the war occasional special forces operations by Israeli troops in Gaza to try and retrieve hostages. Sometimes they've been successful, sometimes they've led to the death of hostages. It's not clear if that's what he means. I mean, it's very hard for us to divine what's actually going on in these negotiations. We've obviously seen the US and the Israeli delegations being withdrawn, with the US side saying that Hamas isn't acting in good faith. But we've also been speaking to Hamas officials that have told us that mediators have said to them that the talks haven't collapsed and that mediators have promised that the Israeli delegation will return back. So some are wondering, is this a negotiation tactic? Is this an attempt to buy time until the recess of the Israeli parliament in about a week? As I say, it's very hard for us to divine what is actually the strategy here on the Israeli and American part.
Emir, we have to leave it there, but thanks for that update, and thanks to Nick there at Westminster as well. Let's speak live on the programme to Antoine Renard, who's the country director for the West Bank and Gaza at the World Food Programme, and thank you so much for giving us your time. UNRWA said a little earlier today the entire humanitarian system is collapsing. Is that what you're seeing yourself?
The challenge that we have as the World Food Programme and many humanitarian is that we need to resort to actually have our assistance going through our distribution systems. What we have now is that we realize that some of the basics are actually still not yet met. We managed to push more trucks within Gaza, but not resorting to our distribution. If I want to have a bit of a, let's say, brighter light out there, is that the fact that now a price of 1 kg of wheat flour is around 10 to 15 pounds. It used to be 3-4 days ago around 70 pounds. Yet it's not sufficient. We need actually to go at scale and reach people where they are. It is really one of the most dreadful periods we've ever faced in Gaza.
Now we're actually seeing people dying of starvation. The worry is that the numbers will accelerate very, very rapidly from now. Is that what you fear?
What we fear is that if we don't manage to have at least 100 trucks, and I'm so sorry to speak about trucks, getting every day into Gaza, we will not be able to avert what is the current situation. This is why we've been asking for it, to have proper safe passages, making sure that, like it was in the beginning of this week, where our team was taking more than 20 hours just to bring 19 trucks. We need to be able to have this flow getting into Gaza, avert the situation as it is, and resort to what was our distribution system. They were efficient. They were actually reaching the right people and making sure that you don't have what you're currently seeing in Gaza.
I was listening to David Mencer, a spokesman for Benjamin Netanyahu, talking to the BBC earlier today. He made 2 points. He said that aid trucks are already in Gaza, hundreds of them, and they haven't been picked up by the aid organisations. He also accused the UN of working with Hamas. When you hear statements like that, just give me your response.
Well, actually, we know how to do our job. We know how to reach people. We've proven it during the ceasefire. We were part of the solution, where hostages were being released, and us actually holding 35% of all the assistance that get into Gaza. What I can tell you is that we're working in endless manner. Just over the last 3 days, we've actually pushed 80 trucks on a daily basis We were not able to do that for the last few days, weeks. We are able actually to bring these goods in. We have none of our food being rotten. We actually are, and we are already asking to the Israeli to replenish our food on the different platforms.
Yes.
When we are able to do our job, everything can be facilitated. This is what needs to be done.
Two final questions. The first briefly, if you would. The IDF now talking about allowing airdrops. Is that just another distraction? Is that what is required to actually get to grips with the enormity of what we're seeing?
Airdrop are not a solution. If you think of the fact that we managed to have 80 trucks just on average over the last few days, the tonnage is massive. Airdrop will not be a solution. The second one that you have as a real challenge, remember that you have only 12% of the Gaza Strip, which by the way are safe zone and where most of the population are. How an airdrop will be done where there's such small space, safe space for population, high probability you will put some of this population at risk with airdrops.
A final question, because aid agencies like yourselves have been making this point with ever-growing alarm for weeks and months, and you've been ignored. Just give me an idea, because you also have a continuation of the military strikes, you have a continuation of vast amounts of people being forcibly displaced. Emotionally, for you, where does that leave you? Angry, frustrated, helpless?
I think that the biggest for me is that our staff are at risk whenever we deliver. Just on Sunday, we were again shot at. We had one of our armored vehicles that was again targeted while people were rushing and we were under gunfire. What is really my frustration is that not only people are at risk in Gaza, but our own staff. That is just not acceptable.
Antoine Renard, we have to leave it there, but thank you for breaking away from your work to talk to us here at BBC News. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks to you.
Well, we're hearing there the latest on the aid situation. We were also hearing earlier from Donald Trump talking to reporters. He was asked a variety of questions. Let me play you a little more, because he was actually asked about aid distribution in Gaza. Have a listen to his answer.
Mr. President, did you speak to Netanyahu about allowing aid drops in Gaza from Arab countries?
Yeah, I speak to him, but I can't tell you what I spoke to him about. But it was sort of disappointing, although I told you. I told you, when you get down to those last 20 hostages, you get down to that last 10 or 20, it's going to be very hard for Hamas to make a deal, because they lose their shield, they lose their cover. We got a lot of them out, a lot of them. We took a lot of bodies out, too. You know, so many of the parents said, please get my son's body back, and we're able to do that. We got a lot of people out, live and people that are not alive. But it was very important to the parents to get their son back, even though they knew their son was dead.
Well, that was Donald Trump. We're going to take a short break. Do stay with us. In a moment or two, we'll get more reaction to what Emmanuel Macron is saying. France recognising Palestinian statehood from September. We'll talk live on the programme to Mustafa Barghouti, waiting to talk to us there in Ramallah. So that interview is coming up next here on BBC News. Around the world and across the UK, you are watching BBC News. Welcome back to Verified Live here on BBC News. Now, as promised, let's get more reaction in terms of some of the diplomacy, significant diplomacy today, with that statement from Emmanuel Macron saying that France will recognise the state of Palestine. He says that will happen in September. Let's speak to the co-founder and Secretary General of the Palestinian National Initiative, Mustafa Barghouti, who joins us live from Ramallah. And Mustafa, welcome here to the programme. Give me your reaction to what you've heard from the French president.
Well, we welcome this announcement, and that's the position of all Palestinian groups without exception. Actually, it was highly welcomed by all the Arab countries in the region and by many international forces, including many European countries like Spain. It's a step that we've been waiting for a long time, and but it raises the question, of course, to the countries that have not yet recognized Palestine. We already have 149 countries that recognize Palestine, but we are still waiting for countries like Britain, United States, and Germany. And I think there is no justification whatsoever for any of these countries to abstain from recognizing Palestine while they are talking about two-state solution. Of course, there were two very strange reactions. Israel, of course, opposed it because Israel doesn't want a Palestinian state. That's the declared policy of Israel. And they want to annex the West Bank, as they have decided in the most recent discussion in the Israeli Knesset.
Yes.
But the other very strange reaction came from the United States. It's very strange that they are opposing recognition of Palestine when they've been talking about two-state solution for a long time.
I'll come back to that point because I have it jotted down in a moment or two. But in terms of those other countries you were referencing, and Keir Starmer is being asked that question repeatedly through the course of today and in the lead up to today, how much of a turning point do you think it is in reality, the French making this move?
I think it's very important that Britain does that. I know that 130 MPs from the British Parliament have already demanded that Starmer will go in that direction and recognize Palestine. If he does so, he will not only be respecting international law and implementing UN resolutions, but also he will be correcting a major mistake done by Britain with the Balfour Declaration, which denied Palestinians their right to their own homeland. And I think that is very much necessary and very much urgent. But let me also mark something very important. It's not enough to recognize Palestine, given the fact that Israel is already destroying the very basis of creating a Palestinian state through illegal settlements and through terrorist settler groups that are attacking Palestinian communities. What is needed is also, in addition to recognition of Palestine, are punitive acts taken against Israel to stop this violation of international law.
Let me ask you a question that I said I would come back to, the two-state solution, because it has been talked about for decades and absolutely parked for decades. Do you think now, as I'm talking to you, that the US actually believes in a two-state solution now under this administration?
Absolutely not. I think President Trump never mentioned the idea of a Palestinian state since he came to power for the second term. I think all the statements we hear from the American administrations are very contradictory to the idea, and they lead to very dangerous moments. As you have seen in Trump now announcing that Palestinians are responsible for not achieving ceasefire. If America does not accept two-state solution, and if they don't accept one democratic state solution, which we would prefer actually, then what do they want? They are practically supporting Netanyahu and his fascist extreme government in conducting ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. And I think that's exactly what Trump meant when he said that Hamas knows that once the Israeli captives are handed over, what will happen? What will happen? Ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians. That is exactly the real Israeli plan, and that is what this American administration seemed to be supporting.
Mustafa Barghouti, we are grateful for your time here joining us on today's programme. Thanks so much, live there in Ramallah for us. We will have plenty more on that story coming up. We have a special report in about 5-7 minutes, a compilation of a whole variety of voices on the ground that the BBC has compiled. So we'll bring you that here on the programme in the next few minutes. But let's turn away to an important story here in England, because the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has warned that the NHS in England faces a challenging few days as it tries to maintain as many services as possible during a strike by resident doctors. The 5-day walkout began at 7 o'clock this morning. The Prime Minister says it will cause a huge loss for the NHS and the country, but representatives of the doctors say the government had every opportunity to avoid the strike but chose not to. Well, let's speak to Julie Thallon. She's the chair of the Board of Trustees at the Patients Association. And thank you for your time. Give me an idea of the impact of a strike like this on patients.
Thank you for inviting us on and allowing us to contribute the patient's voice to this debate, which is really important. This is really sad state of affairs for patients. They've been through so much recently with the delays and the extended waiting times, missed appointments, and this is just layering on the distress for unwell and vulnerable people, and we're really concerned about the impact that this is having now.
We've heard already from various patients who've had operations cancelled, just the levels of distress. In terms of the conversations you're having with people who are in that position, are they being told when perhaps an operation can be scheduled, or are they simply into a world of the unknown?
It varies. It does vary from area to area. The conversations that we've had tend to be people just worrying about the lack of communication that they're having about what will happen and when it might happen. Organisations, I think, are doing their best to try and accommodate that and to keep in touch with patients, but the net effect for many people is that they just don't know. And for those people who have been cancelled again over the next 5 days, this is a really distressing and worrying time. The advice from NHS England, of course, is for people to access services that they need in the same way that it would normally from an urgent and emergency care perspective, and to attend any appointments and surgery dates that they've got unless they're told otherwise. So unless people have been told otherwise, they should to a certain extent carry on as normal. But for all of those people, and there will be many of them who have had cancellations again for the next few days, yes. This is a really difficult time.
I mean, we have had a whole string of strikes, but 5 days is an awfully long time of just day after day the same thing. What do you think are the likely knock-on consequences of that as well, even with more senior doctors?
Well, I can only speak for what will happen to patients, of course, and we have had a 5-day strike before. This is going to be a really difficult time. The extended waits were happening before we even went into COVID. COVID exacerbated it further, and now we're having further delays because of industrial action, which are making things much worse. So people with long-term conditions, people with cancer diagnoses, people with minor conditions that are worsening because they're not getting the care and attention they need in a timely manner. These are all just increasingly concerning for patients, and of course the outcomes will be worse because they're not getting the interventions that they need when they need them.
Julie Thallon, we are grateful for your time. As you say, the patient's voice so important in everything that we're hearing on this story through the course of the day. So thank you for taking time to speak to us here on the programme. Just a quick pointer, because at 5:30 here in the UK, I'll be bringing you an edition of Your Voice, Your BBC News, looking at this strike by resident doctors. You've already sent in lots and lots of questions. We'll be here with our political correspondent, our health correspondent, to try to answer as many of the questions that you've sent in. So that is here on BBC News at 5:30 UK time. Welcome back to BBC News. Let's turn to our main headlines here. The hunger crisis deepens in Gaza. The UN warns the entire humanitarian system is collapsing and starvation is rising. We have a special report coming up from Voices on the Ground. President Macron confirms that France will recognise a Palestinian state. Israel and the US say it rewards Hamas. Resident doctors in England go on strike for 5 days over pay. The Health Secretary warns patients will suffer. And as the pressure mounts on Donald Trump over the convicted paedophile Jeffrey Epstein, we'll talk to one of the lawyers representing some of Epstein's victims. Well, all of that is coming up. First, though, the sport of the day. Ben Croucher is here. And Ben, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you, Matthew. We will start with cricket, where England are taking control of the fourth Test match against India in Manchester, led by Joe Root. The former captain has reached his 38th Test century, helping England past India's first innings total of 358. Root has moved third on the all-time list of leading run scorers in Test cricket. He'll move to second if he reaches 120, so just one more run to go for him, thanks to Ollie Pope's 71 and Ben Stokes' unbeaten 33. England are now at 428 for 4. There's commentary right now over on the BBC Sport website and app. Well, Root is now level with Kumar Sangakkara, joint fourth with the most centuries in Test cricket. Former England batter Mark Butcher told Radio 5 Live just how impressive Root's achievements are.
He was earmarked from a very early age as being sort of, you know, the next big thing, future England captain, great player. But I think the fact that he's kind of kicked into another gear, sort of in the early part of his 30s. A lot of players perhaps start to sort of slow down a little bit, and then the hunger disappears or dissipates. But not with him. He's getting better and better, and Sachin Tendulkar's record is in serious danger.
So football, Newcastle United are in Singapore preparing to face Arsenal on Sunday in a pre-season friendly without striker Alexander Isak. Newcastle arrived in Asia on Friday. They say he's got a minor thigh injury, but it's understood Isak is exploring options away from St James's Park, with Premier League champions Liverpool among those interested in the Sweden striker.
I think that if we lost any player, it would upset. We're a sort of tight-knit group that's been together for sort of 2-3 years now. So yeah, obviously I think any player that leaves, it doesn't help. But from our point of view, just sort of control what we can control at the moment. And yeah, obviously be looking forward to get Alex back when he's fit.
Well, Burnley goalkeeper James Trafford was heavily linked with a move to Newcastle, but he looks set for a return to Manchester City 2 years after selling the Englishman. City have now exercised a buyback clause matching Newcastle's offer of £27 million. That's $36 million. The 22-year-old is expected to sign a 5-year deal. The British and Irish Lions have called upon a familiar figure to help galvanise their squad ahead of the second test against Australia. Martin Johnson, former Lions skipper and World Cup winner with England, joined the team at a dinner on Thursday ahead of their meeting at the Melbourne Cricket Ground on Saturday.
He talked about the mentality for this group, and for him as a player, that wasn't an issue. It was compounding errors. These are the things you need to make sure that you're on top of during the match. And it was, again, what a privilege to have him come in, and he handed some jerseys out, and it was a cool moment, you know, in a tour of loads of cool moments.
Well, Australia head into the match. Knowing defeat would end their hopes of winning a series against the Lions for only the third time in their history. Captain Harry Wilson wants the Wallabies to show their true colours at the MCG.
I feel as if we probably didn't play our sort of footy we wanted to play. We didn't fire as many shots as we would have liked, so we just saw a few areas which we can improve on, and we want to go out there, we want to pose ourselves physically, we want to back our skills, and we just want to go out there and start fast, throw your body around, knowing there's some quality bench players that come in and finish. I'd say there's pressure on both teams. They want to wrap up the series, and we want to keep the series alive.
And sprint qualifying for the Belgian Grand Prix is just getting underway at Spa-Francorchamps. Oscar Piastri was quickest in practice. You can follow our live text coverage of that over on the BBC Sport website and app. There's more here on BBC News throughout the day. Matthew.
Ben, thanks so much. Well, let's return straight away to our main story, because all week across the BBC we've been hearing from people in Gaza about their lives as food supplies are restricted, leading to malnourishment and starvation. The BBC is not allowed to report from inside